US President Donald Trump is threatening to further escalate his trade war with traditional American allies, threatening to slap European alcohol products with a 200% tariff. He's also repeated his ambition to annex Greenland. So is Donald Trump making these decisions alone, or is it done after consultations with his team of advisors? Here's John Barron, co-host of Planet America, to unpack this for us. Hi, John. So who are the people in the background then advising Donald Trump who have the most influence? Do they offer advice that's without fear or favour, or are they just there to agree and implement?
Ros, there have been a number of people around Donald Trump really for the last decade, including advisors like Peter Navarro, Howard Lutnick, who comes from a Wall Street background, Navarro more from an academic background, who are big proponents of tariffs as a way of not just boosting local industries and jobs, but as potentially a replacement for income tax. Now, Donald Trump has this fascination with the economics of the 1890s. He refers to what he wants to bring in now as the golden age. Back in the 1890s, they referred to as the Gilded Age. This is before there were federal income taxes and when tariff protections really created a wall around American industries. And it was the time, of course, where America emerged as a great global power, first economically and then ultimately a little more reluctantly militarily and in terms of its own form of an empire. So Trump sees that as being a time that America could and should go back to. Roll back globalisation, get rid of the kind of post-Cold War NAFTA era of the 1990s where good American manufacturing jobs were, suddenly shipped off to Canada and Mexico. No, bring those jobs back. And the likes of Peter Navarro argue that if you protect American industries, if you impose massive steel tariffs, then you will get steel production happening in America on a grander scale at the moment. The problem with that, of course, is you can't just switch it on. It's not like saying we're going to keep the T-shirt machines running extra hours to replace the tariff-laden T-shirts that are now coming in from China that have become twice as expensive, so we can fill that need domestically. With something like a steel mill, well, it takes a while to build one, and then, of course, you've got all of those input costs that are affected by tariffs as well, because other countries are responding with their own trade restrictions, including near neighbours like Canada, who are saying, well, we're going to put export tariffs on things that we're sending to America. So it's not just Trump putting tariffs on things coming into America. Canada has now been threatening to say, we're going to put tariffs on things we send to you as well to make it even more expensive for you, because even though Trump likes to argue that tariffs are a tax on other countries, they are, of course, a tax on American consumers. American consumers pay for tariffs. They may ultimately get some cheaper goods if they're manufactured domestically, but history says they won't get cheaper domestic products. That's why they've gone offshore in the first place, because they're cheaper.
His approval ratings for his handling of the economy have dropped, haven't they? Does he care about that?
Well, two really interesting things are happening at the moment. We learnt this week, Ros, that Donald Trump is now ignoring the stock market. Previously, in his first term, Trump, as the businessman, as the investor, somebody who made a lot of money in investment, he was very sensitive to a little fall in the S&P or the Dow Jones. In the last fortnight, we've learnt that, and the markets knew that. And the markets knew if they did a bit of a sell-off when they didn't like something Trump had said or done, they could get him to backtrack pretty quickly. Well, over this whole tariffs debacle, Trump has not responded. So the markets are down, and yet Trump is saying, well, we might just have to have a recession. That could be the price we have to pay for the kind of restructuring and reform that we want to bring in. That further spooked the markets because they said, oh, we don't get to influence this guy in the way that we thought we did, and now he's saying recession. Well, maybe we've got to have a recession. That spooked them even further, and of course when markets get spooked and they get less certain, they go down further. So there is this concern that America could spiral into a both inflationary and recessionary cycle as a result of the disruption that these tariffs are going to cause. And of course, most of them don't even start to come in until April. They've been put off a number of times. Trump threatens big tariffs, then often retreats. We think, oh, it's just the art of the deal. He's making these big ambit claims and people back down. And in some cases they do. Canada backed down on those export tariffs of energy to American states that I talked about. So Sometimes it seems like Trump is doing something quite brilliant, and then other times, as the Wall Street Journal has described it, he's embarked upon the, quote, dumbest trade war in history.
Do you detect any other differences in the way he's handling himself this time round compared to the first time, other than his ignoring of the markets?
The guardrails are off, and some of his advisors from his first term referred to themselves as being childcare for a 75-year-old. They're not there anymore. So Trump has got dyed-in-the-wool loyalists like Peter Navarro, like Howard Lutnick. These people that are going to not say, no, Mr. President, they're going to say, yes, and Mr. President. We can go even further. We can consider abolishing income taxes if we put tariffs up high enough. Of course, the fallacy of all of that is that it's not Mexicans and Canadians that are taking American jobs. It's robots that are taking American jobs. Those jobs are not coming back unless you go back to the 1890s and the most high-tech thing you have is a light bulb and a gramophone, because the world has changed so fundamentally. And yet Trump is addicted to this idea that America can be in that gilded age again.
He hasn't fired anybody yet either, has he?
No, well, it depends what time it is. It certainly seems that there are increasing tensions within Trump's cabinet. This is not unusual. We saw it in his first term. We saw it in his business operations. Trump often likes to sow dissent between people working underneath him, create those rivalries and tensions, and they tend to work better, he thinks, or if they don't, he can get rid of the one that he doesn't like today. So we've seen in the last few days some of the tensions spilling over between Elon Musk, who the world's richest man, as a special government employee with this wide-ranging but very ill-defined brief to go around finding savings, waste, fraud and abuse in various government departments, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio very upset at the fact that Elon Musk seems to be having a greater say in American foreign policy than the Secretary of State, as America's chief diplomat, is having. And Elon Musk is shutting down organisations like USAID, the world's largest aid organisation, whereas Rubio is at least trying to keep the core life-saving programs like HIV prevention in Africa. Musk is saying, no, we'll get rid of all of that. So those two have been butting heads in cabinet meetings. And Trump, so far, seems to be, well, heaping praise on both of them, but it's hard to see these two working together for very long.
Talking for Elon Musk then, his fellow billionaires, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, they were the big buddies, of course, with the scenes of them with the inauguration of Donald Trump. They've lost a massive amount of wealth since then, haven't they? What does that tell us?
Well, it says they thought Donald Trump was going to be elected on a pro-business, low-tax agenda, and so far he has just created all of this fire and fury around the markets that has seen their paper wealth, at least, decline. But of course this has real-world implications for the world's richest man on paper, Elon Musk, because the Tesla share price is linked to the loans that he took out in order to buy Twitter and call it X for $44 billion. That's borrowed money. The Tesla share price is falling. The price of people who bought Tesla cars, the resale value, is plummeting as a result. We're seeing attacks on Tesla vehicles and Tesla charging stations in the United States from people that are so angry at what Elon Musk is doing to the American government and to America more broadly. So that is having an effect on him. He's lost $150 billion in his own personal wealth, but also some of these loans that he took out are contingent on the share price staying up. If it goes much further below what it is currently, he's going to have a real cash crunch in order to keep a hold of Twitter, which is why we had this extraordinary spectacle at the White House this week where Donald Trump, who, by the way, is not allowed to drive for security reasons. No American president can drive a motor car. Donald Trump made a big show of buying a Tesla with Elon Musk there and talking about, well, you can buy one of these for $36,000. It was Donald Trump, the salesman for his special advisor, the world's richest man, who is losing money hand over fist, just like the poor folks that bought a Tesla.
Australia, of course, navigating US-imposed steel and aluminium tariffs. We often talk about the special relationship between the US and Australia. We're not the only ones to have that special relationship. Is there anything different, though, can play on that in trying to get an exemption from these tariffs? And what are the highs and lows of that special relationship over time?
Well, right now, Ros, the special relationship means that unlike a lot of other close allies like Britain, Australia and Europe, Australia is not looking at reciprocal tariffs, not wanting to start a one-on-one trade war with the United States, because we know that the ace up Trump's sleeve here is a withdrawal from the AUKUS agreement. And even though Australia has fed billions of dollars into US shipbuilding as a part of our side of that arrangement, which will see nuclear-powered submarines come into the Australian fleet in the 2030s, until then, Donald Trump has this huge sway. So it's quite an unequal relationship. Just as you could argue that Australia's relationship with the United States has always been quite unequal. Ever since 1942 and the fall of Singapore, when it was clear that the British Navy could no longer help defend Australia from potential invaders, in that case it was the Japanese, but ever since then, Australia signed the ANZUS Treaty in the wake of the Second World War to formalise that relationship with the United States. And of course, history has said just about every war that America has gone to since the Second World War, Australia has said, yeah, we're coming along too, we'd love to help. In part, that's because the ANZUS Treaty is not even as robust as the NATO Treaty, which says that there is this mutual defence guarantee. Australia doesn't enjoy that with the United States, so we have to look at other ways of maintaining a similar depth of a relationship, which is why, perhaps, we are not now saying, well, we're going to start putting big tariffs on American goods at all. And at the end of the day, Australia still has a trade deficit with the United States. America, unhappy with what they see as the dumping of Australian aluminium in the United States, but that wasn't, you could argue, was not dumped aluminium. It was aluminium that America wanted, because America doesn't produce aluminium, because aluminium is effectively solid energy. It uses so much electricity to make aluminium, and energy is so expensive already in the United States, they can't afford to produce it themselves, which is why they were bringing it in from Australia and Canada. So Australia is still trying to thread this needle back to all the way with LBJ in the 1960s, and more recently the Middle East, the Gulf conflicts, Afghanistan and Iraq. Australia is trying to remain a strong and loyal ally to the United States, even when the United States under President Trump is not behaving as an ally perhaps should, or Australians would like their ally to do it. But while ever Trump has Australia under the nuclear umbrella and on the hook for nuclear-powered submarines, Australia is likely to try and play nice, say the relationship is fine, and maybe in 4 years there will be a different president, a more traditional president like a Biden or a George W. Bush, who will put the relationship on a more sort of common footing.